Hello, and out there in podcast world. I hope you're having a wonderful day. You're listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery podcast. Myself, Tersh Blissett, one of the hosts, sitting along virtually next to my co-host, Joshua Crouch.
Who is
And
now in Arizona. Finally.
yes,
I feel like I've been
finally.
talking about it forever.
Yeah. And then every time I talk to you, I was like, when is it that you're going to move again?
You must have asked me about 12 times.
I was like, I promise one day I'll remember the date, and then you moved.
Now you don't have to ask anymore. I'm here. No more asking.
Yeah. So it's very early for Josh. So we're probably going to start changing our times a little bit. So Josh
I
doesn't have
didn't
to get up
realize that
quite so early.
it was I think it was Monday this week, and I texted Tersh and I said, you realize this is like 6:30 a.m. out here, right?
Well,
So
I just
we
got
may
off the
have to
phone with
adjust the time a
Julie,
little bit.
and it's like 4:30 in the morning her time, or 3:30 in the morning her time.
She was
and
probably
so-
already awake and kicking ass, I'm sure.
She hadn't gone to bed yet. I don't think she's going to, because she's getting ready to fly out. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's the most ridiculous flight from Hawaii to Savannah. It's like, because of time differences, it takes like a full day to fly. But yeah, that's not why we're here today. We're here. Andy Humphrey, he's got his own podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about sprinklers and that side of things. We don't talk about that on our show a whole lot, like the landscaping service world. And it's one of those things, as little known fact. I don't know if anybody here actually knows this. My grandfather, David Blissett Sr., you may not even know this, Tersh is short for tertiary, which is Latin for three, because I'm David Blissett III. Well, long story short, David Blissett Sr. had a landscape company my entire life. I mean, nurseries and everything else, my whole life. And that is pretty much the only person that was an entrepreneur, other than my uncle, who started his business about the same time I started my first one, that are entrepreneurs in my family. And so I relied on my grandpa a lot about learning what to do and what not to do in business. And every single summer, as long as I can remember, I was out on the golf course laying sod and digging trenches for our sprinkler system. And I hated it, but I loved the money. And honestly, I loved spending time with my grandpa. And so it was really cool. I was able to operate heavy machinery as a 12-year-old, and I just really had a blast doing that. And it's such an under glamorized career industry and business, and it's wild to me. And Andy and I haven't spoken at all, really. And Josh, we met at Podfest, I believe it was, and in Orlando. I'm trying to rack my brain, but it's one of those things, like just making sprinklers, making all that not so icky, like the trades, like just in general. You know what I mean? Does that make sense, Josh?
Well, it's the same thing we talk about with heating and cooling and plumbing and all these things. But Andy is the self-dubbed sprinkler nerd, and he's done a lot for the irrigation industry, including he's even had some chance to get on ABC Shark Tank. Which, if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening to this, you probably know Shark Tank. That's like one of my favorite all-time shows. But so we're gonna have a fun conversation talking about a little bit about e-commerce and the way things are going with that world, because I'm sure 10 years ago, even irrigation companies are like, oh, this stuff's never going to go online. It's never going to happen to me. Same thing we're dealing with HVAC and some of the other industries. So we'll have a really good conversation and have a little different twist on it today, coming from outside of our normal industries that we talk to.
Yeah. And I feel like it's been forever since I've been here. Last week I was actually
It has
gone.
been, dude.
I was whitewater rafting with the 30 teenagers, which was awesome.
Nobody died on your watch, so that's good.
Yeah,
nobody got hurt.
No, but my son on a self-guided so we get there, they have 5 boats and they only have 3 guides, and they look at me and the youth minister and like, hey guys, we need you to guide 2 boats. We're like, oh really? Okay. And so Tyler and I were like, I hope we don't kill any kids, but They didn't. They all survived. All right, let's get started with the show. First, I want to say thank you to the guys and gals at Sarah, amazing sponsors and partners of the show. And if you don't know anything about Sarah and you've ever listened to the show, just listen to this intro every single week. But Sarah's a great platform, and we're learning more and more about the things that they're introducing. They have the telecom portion of it that's new and out and really interesting. We're actually going to do an episode with Billy on that. But if you need a CRM, if you're looking for a CRM for your service business, I think, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, they mainly focus on HVAC, plumbing, electrical. Is that correct?
I believe so for now.
Yeah. So if you're in those trades, check out Sarah. You want to talk about Company Cam?
Yeah. No, another great sponsor of the show. Company Cam helps in a lot of ways. Honestly, it helps bridge the gap between a lot of CRMs are really good about collecting customer records and invoicing some of those things, but the gap of having photos for your business. And honestly, coming from the digital marketing side, we request photos from clients literally every single week. I even have automations built to remind clients to get us photos because it is so important. So something like Company Cam can organize and structure those things where you know exactly where it was taken. The metadata on the photos stays with the photo, which if we put that photo on your website, Google reads that, all kinds of, we start getting in the weeds with that stuff, but it's really good stuff. I would definitely check them out and see how that extension can work with hand in hand with your CRM. They have a lot of integrations and stuff like that. So I would definitely check that out.
Yeah, and we have a code. We'll put it in the show notes, but use that code and you get 14 days free. So, yeah, with that being said, let's get started.
Are you looking for valuable business advice to reach that 7-figure revenue mark? Do you want actionable tips to properly navigate through every business challenge you encounter along the way? Let Tersh Blissett and Josh Crouch be your guide in getting you to the top here at Service Business Mastery. Tune in as they sit down with world-renowned authors in business, leadership, and personal growth who share valuable insights about management, marketing, pricing, human resources, and so much more. Let their nuggets of wisdom gold guide you in owning a thriving, profitable, and ever-growing business. Here are your hosts, Tersh and Josh.
Hey, Andy, welcome to the show.
What is up, guys, and the world?
All right, Andy, you got 2 minutes and then the show is over because we talked so long. So go.
Okay, ask me a question.
So obviously, I love your get up. If you're listening to the show, Andy is like just like myself, and it's like, is that normal? Let's don't do that one. So
I'm assuming that's you on the T-shirt there, Andy.
Maybe
you got
it might have a familiar look.
It just looks like you. That's awesome.
So tell us your background, your history, and a little bit about what you got going on and everything.
Sometimes, honestly, I feel like I'm cursed because I'm way too curious. I ask way too many questions. It's not that I can't sit still. I can sit still. My brain can't sit still. And so ever since I was a kid, I was that kid. Why, Mom? Why do I have to do that? What happens if I push this? What happens if I do that? And so, more recently, I've started to harness that curse and try to turn it into something. But when you are, curious, creative, and you take some action, it's pretty amazing what can happen. So that's kind of my story. So right when I got my first job out of college, I was a landscape architect. I quickly realized that sitting behind a desk wasn't for me.
Yeah, it gets old. You get fidgety, and I'll tell you, my 8-year-old, 8-year-old, 8 or 9. They change birthdays every year. It's hard to keep track, but he's the same way, man. It's like, all right, Memphis, stop. I want to say stop asking questions, but I don't want him to ever stop asking questions.
Right.
I want him to keep asking questions. So I'm like,
yeah, and sometimes when you're like that, school is more difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I could sit still in school. I wasn't, fidgety, but my mind was all over the place. And I'm only now realizing that that's why I wasn't as good at taking tests and regurgitating information. But give me a project, give me something to do, let me be creative, and I will get an A every time.
That's really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
very creative thought process. So you have obviously very professional setup here, and you sound amazing. So uh, would lead us to believe that you have some sort of podcast as well.
I do. Yeah. It is called the Sprinkler Nerd Show. And that took a long time to start. I would say that like there's a lot of having an idea and the idea stirs. And then you're like, all right, damn it. I got to do something with this. Or I'm
Why
gonna
didn't I
go
start
nuts.
this 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long was it that you were thinking about doing it before you actually did it?
Honestly, probably about 5 years, because as soon as I started listening to podcasts myself,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, man, and not service podcasts, right? I'm talking digital marketing, e-commerce, the other sort of skill sets that I was learning. I'm like, man, how come this doesn't exist in my industry?
Yeah.
Right.
That's literally
that's exactly what Tersh did.
Exact same thing. Like so here's what happened to me. I had an hour to drive to my kids' private school, and then an hour from there to my office, and then an hour back home. And so like I drove that every single day, and I was listening to Michael Gerber, E-Myth, and like everything I could pick up, Donald Miller's books, and I was listening to everything I could on the truck drive. But then I was like, man, this is getting expensive. I'm buying a new book every day. And then that's when I picked up podcasts. And then I was like, all right, Michael Stelzner, like, all those good things, just like you mentioned. And then I found Brian Orr's HVAC school podcast. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's in our industry. He's talking technical. I was like, I reached out to him just randomly. I was like, hey, man, do you know of any business podcasts in the HVAC world? And he was like, no, I actually don't know of any business podcasts. Why don't you come on the show and we'll talk business? I was like, let's do it. And then that turned into this snowball of a thing that we got here in 2017 is when we started it. So
yeah,
same thing.
And it's a good reminder that you don't have to create something brand new that the world's never seen. You just have to find something that's working somewhere else and make it work somewhere new, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't invent podcasting. I didn't invent podcasting. I just saw it working somewhere else and was like, oh, I think I could do that too.
So how long, and this is not our topic here, but I want people to really pay attention to this because there's so many people who listen to the show and they're talking about starting a local podcast. Josh and I have talked about this before, about starting local podcasts to really become the expert in your community. And then you get this, well, one, you get a little imposter syndrome, but then you get a little bit of everybody's doing that. When in reality, something I learned at Podfest is, I don't want to tell the numbers wrong, but there's a ridiculous amount of people that are doing blogs, written blogs on their website and YouTube videos. But that compared to the amount of podcasts, podcasts are tiny, even though it feels like there's so many people that are doing it. How long did you feel like there was a saturation once you actually pulled the trigger and did it, or,
So here's the thing that I try to remind myself. My audience is still not yet listening to podcasts. Not every landscaper and irrigation contractor is listening to a friggin' podcast. We're talking about early adopters are listening.
Yeah.
And early adopters are a small percentage of any market, right? Technology doesn't just run rampant in the service businesses. They're not lining up for the latest and greatest tech widget that's going to help their business. And so the audience is probably still 3 years out before it really starts to take off because they're just not sitting there lining up to listen to podcasts yet.
Yeah, I would imagine, thinking back to my landscaping days, the guys I ran with, if we listened to anything, it was going to be something like a Joe Rogan. That's the only, some podcast like that, not necessarily thinking about the business side of things.
Something to entertain you during the day.
Yeah. And that's still true, man. Nobody wants to listen to like how to put pipe together better. It's like, dude, they know that.
Yeah.
They want some information and they want to be entertained. They want both of those together. And probably entertainment is more important sometimes than the information, because in order to be engaged in the information, you have to be engaged first.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. No, and to hammer Tertius' point, just looking up on Google, there's more than 500 million. And I think that number was back in 2019, 500 million blogs. And I think there's like 2.5 million podcasts or something like that.
Yep.
So if you put it in perspective of those two things, we have a long ways to go before we get to that point. And again, there's so many people that start podcasts, and as you know, Andy, keeping this going. It can be a grind at times, especially when your business is busy or you got other things going on. Then, this is like the last thing you're preparing for the day.
Yeah. For me, what's difficult is talking blindly into the microphone. I can do interview chats all day long. That's comfortable. It's easy.
Because you can see people.
But for me to talk to myself is freaking hard.
I will be honest with you. There's like 17 of me. So like, it's a different person I can talk to. Like we can have conversations all day long. So
yeah. You mean in your head, there's 17 of you? Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But
that sounds like a great podcast episode.
Yeah. But I think that, so to me, the podcast is all about community, right? So I think, and content. So it's partially content, also community building. And so for me, when I look at the world of either service or commerce, you have commerce, content, and community. When you put all those three things together, you really have like media company. And I feel like where the world's coming together is if you were a product only company, now you're bolting on like some YouTube and some podcast and some like private Facebook groups, and everybody's sort of just becoming their own little media companies that are made up of commerce, content, and community.
That's a really, really good point, because that's the identity that I struggled with for years with the podcast when starting it. And I'm just thinking in my head, 2017 is when I started the podcast. I don't know how for one, how I've continued to do it. This is probably the only thing that in my life that I didn't go, oh, shiny object, I'm going over there. Like, but it's, once Josh came on board and we could wrap our heads around like, all right, this makes sense. That community and everything that you just mentioned right there is really, when you see a brand, a good brand, like I'm thinking like Black Rifle Coffee Company or something like that. Like they have a great product, 9-line clothing apparels here in Savannah. They have Black Rifle Coffee there as well. But it's like, it's a product, but then they build a community around that product. I got ink all over my hand. But ADD's kicking in over here. But it's really true though, what you said, building that community, and then the podcast, then the media comes along. It's like those places are 9-line's a t-shirt company. Like that's what they do is t-shirts, but they're more of a media mogul now almost because of all of the influencers and everything that they have.
Yeah, because you might only need to buy something maybe once a year, maybe once a month on an interval, but how can you stay engaged and entertained where you also feel like you believe what they believe, so you're on the same sort of wavelength?
How do you so e-commerce, let's talk a little bit about e-commerce. How do you keep that engagement without becoming spammy, in your opinion?
Add value, not coupons. So I would say if you remember that, like, and I didn't coin that term, my mentor, George Bryant, coined that term, but it applies to service businesses also, because in service business, there's often either a race to the bottom or a void feeling where you're like, oh, let me just get a coupons, give them a discount so they'll sign this agreement. And it's like, dude, stop discounting and start adding value.
Yes. 100%.
Well, I think that's the way a lot of coaches and a lot of even marketing companies and stuff are like, hey, what promos do you have that we can run this month to try to get those conversions for a certain percentage of the population? But in reality, nurturing your own customers, because everybody's got a list. If you've done one service call, you got a list, right? You got a list that you can start to nurture and you can start to give education. And just from my own company, I have not done any advertising in the 2.5 years we've had a business. It's all been educational content. That's how we built it. And that's all we've done. At some point we'll probably have to, step on the accelerator a little bit, but it's been really good. And I know Tersh has done some of that stuff too. And I saw, just looking on your website, you have a lot of YouTube videos, which I'm assuming go over the products and how to use them and things like that, depending on who your target audience is.
Yeah, and that YouTube is new. And I just want to step back for a moment, because in a service business, you don't need to, send all these discounts and coupons and all that, but you can communicate with your customers. And the idea is really how can you build the best relationships with your customers? How can you outcare your competition? And I believe by sort of being more vulnerable and letting them know who you are, because people don't buy companies. they buy the people in the company. And sometimes we all hide behind this veil of, man, I've been in business 25 years, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, who fucking cares? Who are you?
Exactly.
I trust you. Tell me why I should trust you.
Yeah, that's it. Whenever I was looking at KPIs a couple of weeks ago, and when we had dips in our average, it was definitely when we were less engaged with our audience, and it was definitely whenever we were grinding. So internally in the business and in our HVAC company, we felt like let's go, we're really hustling and we're grinding internally, but we weren't sharing with our clients like how much we cared. Like we one dropped down, and because we thought, well, we're gonna put more emphasis in the like grind and make sure like double checking all the guys' numbers, their KPIs, like what are you offering and all this other stuff. And then we really lost focus on making sure we're clearly communicating with the client and having that relationship building more and more relationships with the clients. And our revenue numbers were tanking, and then make the switch, and then the numbers go right back up. And it's crazy how that works. But, you know, in my business, and I know that I'm the only one, this never happens to anybody else, but since it's working, we're probably going to stop doing it. So that's just how I do things, which makes 100% sense. But just showing that you care to the clients and communicate with the clients. I mean, what you said is spot on.
Yeah. So kind of like caring, and in a digital world, we're losing the human side of things. And so whatever you can do to be more human matters more than ever. So there's like this dehumanization of the world right now. So anything you can do to show that, you know what, sometimes you make mistakes and sometimes you're afraid, and sometimes like those sorts of things matter more than ever, because that's really believable, you know? So like when I'm making a YouTube video, I don't edit anything other than adding like some B-roll and overlay. But like, I don't, if I say something wrong, it's just like, oops.
Right. You're not scripting it out.
Right. No, there's no script
ahead of time.
Every one of them is a total, just me speaking, a riff.
Yeah. And it's not overproduced. That's the thing.
Right.
Yeah. Because like when you see, I've even seen some people who have a production company, but they're still like the camera is moving like it's somebody's holding a cell phone. Like they do that on purpose to make it look less overproduced, and more authentic. I mean, I'm not saying do that, but
but that keyword authenticity is what matters right now. Exactly. How can you be authentic?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from experience, the couple contractors that I work with that have allowed us to like give them ideas for videos and have actually taken action on this. Because I tell a lot of people that they should be shooting videos, and you know, this is how you can look for certain topics that people are searching for. They get really good feedback through social media and stuff like that when they actually post those videos and make themselves vulnerable or teach their local community why it's so important that this needs to get done in a certain interval of time. Like landscaping is a great example. Why should you have a pro do these things? What kind of problems happen if you do not? What kind of common issues arise? I know for one, like my last house, I cut the grass myself, and I didn't do anything else to the lawn. And we had dead spots. We had dandelions all over the place, like all kinds of issues. And I wish I would have hired a pro, because it looked like ass. But I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm in Arizona. Everything's like turf and the grass is dead anyways, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Plus they're pretty good with the green spray paint down there.
So Andy, you mentioned like the irrigation industry. You feel like from really getting into like the podcast and stuff might be a few years away, but you are in the e-commerce side of things now. So my furry friends are coming to say hi to us this morning.
Hey.
But what do you feel? Because e-commerce in heating and air conditioning, which is the industry Turch and I are both originally from, it is a big topic right now, and it's like a Republican Democrat split.
It's very polarized.
You're one or the other.
You mean like you support it or you don't, or you believe in it or you don't?
Yeah, it's very any conversations we've had through social media get a ton of engagement, and it's either I'm for or against.
Right. So everybody's right, because everybody has a lens. So
and that's, and I guess
right.
Yeah, my question to you is, what are you seeing in the irrigation industry, both from the contractor and maybe the homeowner side, with the adoption of e-commerce?
It's so people adopt it from where they sit, right? From their lens and their shoes and their business. And so early adopters, all in, right? Laggards are more, I don't know. I just like to go to the supply house on my way to the job. But in the
Yeah.
at the same moment, they complain that they have to wait for an hour when they're there. So it's like, okay, well, you have a choice. You can continue to wait, or you could buy online, pick up in the store, which is referred to as BOPUS. And if you're doing that, the website doesn't have to be super great, as long as you can find the parts that you need. And if you're a pro, typically, you know the part numbers, you use them every day or a lot of them. And that would be my recommendation for a supplier, is just nail, buy online, pick up in the store, because it's a convenience. It saves time. And from there, you can go scale all the way up to, DIY, which we have a lot of DIY, and they really want their item within 2 days, right? Shipped and delivered within 2 days.
How do you combat your Amazons and stuff like that?
So you can't combat Amazon. You have to shift the
I
way
figured you had the golden ticket there.
You can either choose to do business with Amazon and figure out where it fits or how it fits, or say, you know what, it doesn't really fit, so I'm not going to let it occupy space in my mind. Because if you're not careful, you could see it like an enemy instead of just choosing, I'm not even going to look anymore because I'm done looking in the rearview mirror. I'm only going to look ahead, and Amazon's not in my future past, so I'm putting it aside. There is a ton of opportunity on Amazon, especially with non-sexy items, for someone who is in the industry and wants to source some particular repair part and put it for sale on Amazon, or some kind of a kit to sell direct to consumer. Tell you, tons of opportunity.
So landscape in general is a love-hate relationship for me. We have 250 acres, and cutting grass, I'll do it. It's not something I love doing. Because every time I do something, I break it when it comes to landscaping. We have a zero turn that I bought 2 years ago now, I think. I don't know what I hit. I hit something. Somebody hit something. My son hit something. I don't know. But
it's probably a sprinkler.
Yeah. No, we don't want to have any sprinklers, or else it definitely would be. It definitely
they don't need any help growing the grass in Georgia.
Oh my gosh. It was probably a root is probably what it was. But anyways, seized up a bearing, broke a blade, and man, it took forever to find these parts. And we found it on Amazon and got it shipped here. And they actually, the store at Amazon, on Amazon, actually had the right size blades and everything. And so it's like, all right, so now I'm not even going to go to Lowe's anymore and purchase these blades. I'm going to only shop from this store that is on Amazon. And so I'm like, if that person would have been like, I'm only going to sell local and I'm never going to sell online, I'm never going to sell on Amazon, because this particular store is the only store that had the 3 bearings that for the deck and the blades, and I wouldn't have been able to purchase it, and I wouldn't be able to purchase it, repeatedly whenever I need blades replaced. So what you said makes perfect sense there. We could definitely, if it becomes an enemy, then that's all you're going to think about is how Amazon's stealing all your customers and all this other stuff. Whereas you can just honestly just team up and work with them. Yeah.
Or stop worrying about them.
Yeah. Or just take it right out your mind.
Here's what we have in our store, right? If you're a physical store, the problem is that shelf space is limited. Yeah. So that must have been a rare part-ish that you were looking for. So people local didn't have it because they only have so much shelf space, and they got to maximize turns and all that. So that's what they should focus on, and not be worried that, man, one customer in 2 years came looking for that and they couldn't find it. So they went to Amazon.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah. And so, like, as it relates to me and my e-commerce, what I built and how I describe it is a digital layer on top of wholesale distribution. So I'm tapped into 8 different wholesale suppliers around the country so that I can have a broad inventory base and have it regional. So if you order some parts and you live in California, I can ship from California. And the parts that people buy in California are slightly different, let's say, than New York or Florida. and you couldn't really take that breadth of product and put it under one warehouse. I mean, you could, but financially it just wouldn't make any sense. And I believe that the parts are already on the shelf somewhere. And so sprinklersupply.store.com is what I might refer to as like ship from the shelf. Ordered online, and then there's a wholesale distributor that takes it off their shelf, puts it in a box, and ships it.
So how often do you have a problem with stuff not getting shipped when it's supposed to be?
Not anymore. 10 years of this, we built pretty good systems.
There's times that it's like one of my vendors will say, oh yeah, the other store that's in Bluffton, they forgot to ship it out yesterday. I'm like, are you serious? Because I already told my customer that it's going to be here today.
Yeah. So one thing that really changed that helped us was we started to, every day we send out a report to all the shipping locations. Did they ship 100%? Was it 90%? And everyone's on this email. So there's a little bit of accountability. No one wants to look to their peers like they didn't meet their SLA that day.
Yep. That makes sense.
Absolutely. No, so when it comes to e-commerce and contractors, do you see contractors like irrigation companies, landscape companies start to offer products or services online and then fulfill those things and maybe just provide the labor or anything like that? Are you seeing any sort of shift that way?
Sometimes what we are seeing is that the largest B2B, traditional service companies, the largest irrigation companies, let's say, really have the best relationships with the wholesale suppliers, because that account manager, right, has a book of business. He's like, hey man, this guy's worth 100,000. They focus on contractors that are worth, let's say 50,000 and up, but likely more like 100,000 and up. But you have these, what I think are like a tier 2 business. It could be the grounds manager at a park district. It could be the maintenance manager at a large corporate complex, right? They're not installing sprinklers for a living, but they're an advanced DIYer. They can go fix that sprinkler. And they're small enough where a wholesale distributor's account manager doesn't want to spend their time on that guy.
Yeah.
But that guy doesn't need to go to a branch to pick something up. He can just order it, right? It's like a tier 2 business to business. And those are sort of the guys that are ignored right now.
And so
kind of like MRO business a little bit, but there really isn't MRO business for irrigation supplies. If you have a maintenance manager at a Hilton hotel, maybe they can buy the repair part for the furnace and put it in themselves without calling, their HVAC service tech. Yeah,
totally. Now, as far as consumers instead of B2B, I think Josh was kind of asking, like, do you see any of your contractors that are purchasing from your site or anything like that? Do you see any of them building out their own e-commerce on their website for their consumers?
Have not seen that. I do think there is an opportunity for that. It's something that I've thought about, just leveraging, like, digitally, I could leverage my inventory for them. They could like resell our inventory on their website. But again, they're not out here all screaming for new technology. That's pretty far advanced for them. A lot of them don't have a website. They don't even have their own email. It's just like Joe's Lawn Service at gmail.com. I mean, we're talking like, a lot of these guys don't have any of that.
Sure.
How long do you think before, or I don't know, just your projection, because you're in this industry and Josh and I aren't necessarily. Do you think it will ever come to the point to where that's going to really, you're going to have to be online. You're going to have a website. You're going to have an email, or is it going to stay forever? Like, look up on Craigslist and get the guy that's down the street to come cut the grass.
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's sort of like saying, do you think credit cards will ever be everywhere? Like, seriously, like 20 years ago, it's probably people were thinking, man, do you think we'll be able to buy everything with a credit card? And now it's sort of like, do you think we'll be able to buy everything with our phone or with Venmo or whatever? Yeah, you can still use cash, but how often do you really see a cash only place? Maybe ice cream or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think it will.
Yeah, and all I want to do when I see that is be like, you guys need a card reader.
Right.
Because I don't carry cash.
Dude, I'm gonna tell you.
Are you not reporting? I get it.
Exactly. We have a chicken place right down the street. Like, it is good fried chicken, but it's only cash. and they're only open for like 3 hours a day, but it's packed for that 3 hours, and everybody comes in and pays cash. And I'm like, wait a minute, something's not on the up and up right here. I don't believe. But
and if I had to predict, I think what we're seeing is technology coming from the bottom up, meaning consumers will demand it, and that's when the change happens. It's not it's not top down where the contractors roll it out. It's like they're only doing it because they're being coming from the bottom up, and that's I think a shift. We're seeing it on like Wi-Fi timers and things like that. The contractors aren't the ones out there convincing their homeowners of it. The homeowners are actually the ones convincing the contractors, hey, man,
they've done their research.
I want that Nest thermostat. And the contractor like, dude, that's a consumer product. We don't install Nest.
That conversation
like, where does that come
all the
together?
time?
Oh, yeah.
It happens a lot.
And
believe me,
you know
I built my
service-
house. And the guy's like, we don't do that stuff.
You know how many service calls? Contractors love Nest because they get service calls and new customers very easily because a lot of people install those wrong.
If you know what you're doing, which Josh is making an amazing point there. And I feel like, Andy, you're touching on this. Like, if you are connected with the Nest world, so like we're a Nest Pro partner. Service Emperor, my business, is a Nest Pro partner. If you look on any of our vehicles, you can pull all 12 of them to the side, and you will not find one Nest product on any of those vehicles, because we don't sell Nest products, because they are consumer. Like they purchase it from wherever they want to purchase it from. We can't get it any cheaper than they can. So we get the phone calls, hey, I put my thermostat on wrong, and now my whole thing's not working, or I've fried something. And it's like, cool. Instead of being mad at Google and Nest, we've taken that and said, all right, so let's make lemon out of lemon, or lemonades out of lemon. And when this faulty thing happens, now we can go and we can inspect their entire air conditioning unit and make sure that the system is working properly.
Maybe make them a maintenance customer so you can come back again. Something
like that. Yeah. And so I feel like that's where, I don't know, that's the consumer. What you're saying is exactly right, because whenever I go to purchase something, if I can't purchase it online, I'm lazy. If I have to do too much, then it's like, all right, there's another person selling the same exact product that's going to do this for me. And I wonder how many landscapers realize the loss of revenue because they're not doing whatever card services, or they're not online and because for me, I don't really trust Craigslist a whole lot. So when I'm looking up something, it's not typically Facebook Marketplace. I know some people, like, that's where they live and die, is that world. But for me, I'm a Google person. I'm just going to Google it, look at your reviews, read most of them, read how you responded to the bad reviews, and then pick from there. And if you're not on Google, you're probably not going to get my business.
Yeah, or from a friend, right? I mean, I think a lot of it's referral.
Yeah, that too. That as well.
Who do you use?
I do think contractors, especially in like the landscaping, because we just moved, so we didn't have a landscaper, and we do have some grass. So I shouldn't say we don't have any grass. We do, but we went with the local recommendation. We have a little subdivision type community here, and we went on that page and asked, and everybody recommended this guy named Diego. So Diego got our business because they're like, this guy's amazing. He does a great job. He's on time, all this stuff. I do think there's a lot of that community stuff. And that's where you were talking about, like, building that community and building that educational content, especially through like Facebook. I think Facebook's a big one for like landscaping, because people they're like, because they realize they go to Google and everybody's got 3 reviews. They're like, okay, they're not really taking their time here, but they're on Facebook. They got hundreds of recommendations, because that industry, that's where people find landscapers. They don't necessarily go to Google for that. And I think it's knowing your industry too. But that educational content that I know I've seen on your website and stuff, that stuff goes,
it's a peace of mind thing too, because like, for real, like, if you're going to educate everybody, then I know that you know what you're talking about. And so
you're the teacher in front of the classroom.
And like I said, that's the value, right? The more you can talk with your customer, not over them, right? Don't talk about stuff that is just making you try to sound smart.
Make
Yeah.
the
You talk
complicated easy.
with them, that's building trust. And then they may not go with the lowest person anymore because they trust you, and that's worth something. That's value.
So let me ask you this, Andy, really fast. That for those who are listening that are contractors, and it's one of those things where you're like, I've been in the industry for 17 years. I don't know what to like. I don't know what people want to know about. I don't know what to make of content video about. What do you say? How do you say to answer that question?
Well, I would say like, okay, if you've been in the industry in 17 years, what have you learned that is value? Like, and be in the customer's shoes. What do they want to know? Can you walk them around the house and show them exactly what you're going to do? Like, just, show them what. So when I worked for a landscape company in Maryland, my first job was at Chapel Valley Landscape Company. And when I first got into irrigation, it was from the design side. So I was doing CAD drawings of irrigation systems. And then I got into sales, and what was working is we would draw up the irrigation system, right, on CAD, and then show it to the homeowner. This is where we're putting your sprinklers. Here's where the pipe is going. And our close rate was like as close to 100% as you could get, because no one else was doing it. They were using carbon copy. This was 20 years ago. And holy shit, we looked like we knew what we were doing, and we did, but there was real value there.
And it took the questioning out of it. I think for contractors, we have this this black cloud above our head of just really like either going to get one over on you, or they're not going to complete the job, or not complete it like you had in your mind. So for you to draw out that CAD drawing, and then they're like, oh yeah, like this is exactly what I had envisioned in my mind. Or actually, no, I'm glad you wrote that out, because I was thinking we could put this over here, this sprinkler head over here. And then you're like, no, I can't put that sprinkler head that close to whatever, the electrical panel or whatever the case is. And so then they're like, oh, okay. So there's less frustration. You have that clear path of communication.
Yeah.
And it's just a win-win for everybody.
And that's all trust. When we built our house 4 years ago, and it's a walk-in on the ground level. So the ground level is our basement. And when they were putting in the HVAC and the air duct returned, it went across the the ceiling on the basement level.
Yeah.
And it had to drop it on one section by like 2 feet. And they're walking me through, here's where we're going to put that. And I'm like, what? Wait,
Yeah.
Why didn't you show this before? Like, why are we doing this now? This should have happened like a long time ago. Then I would have known that right there was going to be, the ceiling was going to be lower.
Yeah. That clear communication, that's a tough one. Over communicating, because as a service technician or whatever, whenever you're talking to a homeowner or consumer in general, it's a fine line. Like Donald Miller, he talks about building your story brand and making sure your platform's not overly complicated. But then so like if you are talking on a level between 1 and 10, you're at a 10, you know what number 10 is, like that's your intelligence level, but your consumer is like a 2. When we dumb things down, quote unquote, dumb things down, we typically dumb them down to a 6, maybe a 5, but we really need to be dumbing it down to a 2 so that they can really consume. And
it's
they
like
don't
you're talking to grandma, remember? So explain it like grandma can understand it.
Yeah. And so as a technician, you don't want to be like, what's the best way to say this? Like, you don't want to talk down to people, like you said before, but you don't.
You want to talk to them, like find out what they're interested in, walk them through.
Find something relatable
that
they can understand.
Yeah. No, I like it. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah.
So Andy, where's the best place people, if they have questions or anything, because like you said, even creating YouTube videos for you is new. If they want to just check out what that looks like.
Yeah. The YouTube channel
where should they go?
Is Sprinkler Supply Store. So I'm trying to bolt on everything I do. My character persona is Sprinkler Nerd Andy, and the show is the Sprinkler Nerd Show. The website is Sprinkler Supply Store. YouTube channel is Sprinkler Supply Store. They can reach out to me, andyhumphrey.com. or andy@sprinklersupply.store.com. Happy to connect, share stories, share ideas. I really like connecting with folks in the service business. Absolutely, because I can learn a ton too.
Yeah, I think we all can. And that's it's great that we had someone from a different industry on, because sometimes we get so like even ourselves we get blinders on, like, oh, we got to have this person in the HVAC world or this person in the plumbing world, and we kind of sorry about that. But we have we put blinders on and we kind of forget. Oh, there's so many different home.
Even I love the fact that you
businesses.
mentioned company cam, because I shouldn't say no one. Someone is likely using it in my industry, but I've never come across. I'm usually the one recommending people use company cam, and some of this like sophisticated web-based controller platform software. They say, "Oh man, could you add this feature where we could take a picture?" And I'm like, "Dude, it already exists. Just go use company cam. You don't need to reinvent company cam in someone else's software."
Exactly.
Well, and one more point about that. So our landscaper, his name is Diego. Every single time he comes out, he takes pictures of what was done, and also pictures of like the windows, because we have a lot of windows in the backyard, just to make sure. And we have a lot of rocks. So he wants to, so it's proof, right? But it's smart, because if we're not home and he comes out and does his thing, and we come back, something's broken, he can take pictures, and he has proof for his own business. He's kind of CYAing himself. But it's so true that, doing those types of things and leveraging the technology that already exists. I mean, there's technology for literally just about anything you could possibly imagine.
And I think you had on a woman named Hannah. She was like talking about Gen Z in the workplace. Yep. And I think that everything we talked about is going to be true once the Gen Z is in the business and the business is run by Gen Z. Everything that we talked about just makes sense. It's like, yep.
100%. Yeah. We got to make it. So
that's coming fast.
Yeah.
It's coming real fast.
And Gen Zers should look into non-sexy service businesses, because there's nothing wrong. This is where the world, I think, gets it wrong. And you should not feel shame if you are a plumber.
Yes.
Plumbers make a lot of fucking money.
Exactly.
Yes, they do.
Dude, stop. We got to stop talking down to service businesses.
I'm looking at my payroll every week, and I'm like, these jokers are making double what I made when I was in that.
Yeah.
I was doing that.
Or you could sit at a desk somewhere and hate your job and hate life and want to get out, and you're stuck.
And they get like, and there's also a lot. I mean, a lot of these guys and the technicians that I've managed previously, that feeling of helping someone one-on-one, really making someone's day and a personal touch to that, because they were in the home, they had to fix a problem that was really causing a lot of stress for a homeowner. That stuff is like, you can't replace that with anything. Yeah, you can't replace that feeling. It's almost like you feel like you're wearing a superhero cape. Mm-hmm. Like you saved the day for one person today, or 4 people, or how many jobs you do. But you're really helping someone out and making their life better.
Yeah. And if someone has a college fund and it's enough to pay for college in 2022, it's enough to buy a service business also.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Amen to that.
Yep. 100%. 100%. Cool, Andy. Man, we really appreciate hanging out with us and chatting.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Make sure you check out the Sprinkler Nerd Show podcast and follow Andy and connect. And if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to Andy. Josh, you want anything?
No, this was great. I think we need to try to find some more people in different industries. It's fun. It's always fun to connect with people that have different industry, different insight, different experiences, because, and I challenge, landscape is a great example for HVAC, because landscape is a repetitive business, right? Usually it's like once a week, once every other week. And our service businesses that are like maybe once a year, we try to make it that. Maybe we can learn something of how these landscapers are doing those types of things.
Yeah. And I have to always remind myself, the difference is that there's no barrier to entry to landscape. None. Sure. Like you don't need a certification. You don't need, you need
a push mower.
You don't need anything. Yeah. So it's very entrepreneurial. Yeah.
The thing that I love about the sprinkler industry and everything is, I mean, there's a lot of it that I grew up doing it on the golf courses. We were half a golf course. I remember just being there for years, replacing greens and everything else, and landscape and sprinkler systems and everything like that. Man, I remember we had pipe trailers, and oh my gosh, I had nightmares about those PVC pipes and slamming lids down with all these fittings and stuff. Man, I still have some of those fittings from my grandpa back like in my shop, but just everything that I learned as a kid. And like you said, there's no barrier to entry. So you don't have to be in the industry for 15 years and to prove that in order to get a license to be able to do that kind of thing, which is probably good and bad, because you could have bad installs of sprinkler systems.
And it's another reason people in the landscape industry don't value themselves oftentimes, because they're like, how can I charge $150 an hour? I didn't go to college. They devalue themselves.
So true.
Where if they had an actual license, a certification, then that can feel like there's something else. But really, you just got to value yourself. That's it.
Honestly, yeah. Provide the value, because it's so true. I could hire the teenager down the street for $20 to come cut my grass, or I could pay $150 for this other company. Why would I pay $150 versus $20? There's value in the $150. There's consistency. I know that they're going to come back.
And if there isn't, you won't hire them.
Time.
So it just, you always have to remind yourself, am I adding more value than this $150? If you are adding more value than you're proposing, they'll go with your proposal.
Absolutely.
Or do a case study, hire the $20 an hour kid first, then hire the 150 and see the difference.
Yeah. It's wild.
Most likely there is a difference.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
Right.
Or that kid that's doing $20 an hour is
if there
undervaluing
not,
himself.
Keep the kid and then find a place for him in your business.
Right. Cool, Andy. Again, we really appreciate hanging out with us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys as well. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys later. We'll see you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Service Business Mastery. Now that you are equipped with essential business advice from this impactful conversation, you are one step closer to becoming the successful owner of your dreams. If this episode has been helpful to your business journey, don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and share it with other owners as well. Visit servicebusinessmastery.com to learn more.